All right, everybody, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Well, today we're going to be looking at software testing. I've got a document here all about it, specifically functional and non-functional testing.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin, really.
That's what it seems like. So, like, when an app gets made, someone's got to make sure it actually works right.
Oh, absolutely. Can't just release it into the wild and hope for the best. Users expect things to work. That's where testing comes in.
Makes sense. So let's start with, I guess, what this document calls functional testing.
The bread and butter.
Yeah, like the nuts and bolts. Does the app do what it's supposed to?
Exactly. Does it function correctly? Hence the name. It's about verifying that each function performs as expected based on, the requirements and all that.
So if you're testing like a login feature.
Right. You try different scenarios like, okay, correct login, correct password, what happens?
It logs you in.
Right.
Right.
Hopefully. Then what about wrong password?
Error message.
Yeah. And there's the forgot password option. Each one should lead to the right outcome. The app has to be able to handle all of those things.
Right. Otherwise, it's a pretty bad app.
To say the least.
So that's just one feature though, right?
Yeah.
What about like the whole app?
Well, you test at different levels.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like building a house. You start with the foundation, then you build up from there.
Gotcha.
So you start with unit testing. Testing those tiny little pieces of code.
Individual functions.
Right. Then you've got integration testing, making sure all those pieces actually work together.
Yeah. They got to play nice.
Exactly. Then you move on to system testing, looking at the entire app as a whole.
So at that point, you're like, all right, does this whole thing work?
Yep. And finally, you have acceptance testing. This is where the user or client gets to say, yep, this is what I wanted.
So that's the final thumbs up.
Exactly. It makes sure that the software isn't just technically sound, but also actually fulfills the needs of the users and the business.
It's got to do what it's supposed to do.
Precisely.
Okay, so that's functional testing, making sure the app actually functions.
Right.
But this document also talks about non-functional testing.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is kind of like, I don't know, checking if the app is actually enjoyable to use.
That's a great analogy. Think of it as testing the feel of the app. How fast is it? Is it secure? Is it user-friendly?
Right, because an app could technically work, but still be terrible to use.
Exactly. These are critical aspects that can make or break an app, even if all the functionalities work perfectly.
So let's say like 1,000 people are all trying to log into an app at the same time.
Oh, good example.
Does the app just crash?
Well, we hope not. That's where performance testing comes in.
Okay.
It's about simulating those real-world scenarios you mentioned, seeing how the app holds up under pressure. Does it slow down? Does it crash?
And I'm guessing security testing is a big part of non-functional testing too.
Absolutely. Can't forget about security. We have to make sure that sensitive user data is protected. That's paramount.
Right, of course.
So performance testing, security testing. This document also talks about usability testing, compatibility testing, and reliability testing.
So like usability is making sure the app is easy to use.
Exactly. Is the interface intuitive? Can users find what they're looking for easily?
Makes sense.
And compatibility testing. That ensures that the app works across different devices and browsers.
Oh, right, because not everyone's using the same phone or computer.
Exactly. And then there's reliability. The app needs to perform well over time.
Consistently.
Right, even with continuous use.
So it really is like a whole other layer of testing beyond just making sure things work.
Precisely. You need both functional and non-functional testing for an app to truly succeed.
Right. It's like having a car. The car might start, but if the steering wheel's wobbly and the brakes don't work...
It's not a very good car.
Exactly. No one wants to drive that.
It's about creating a complete experience, not just a functional product.
I like that. So who's actually doing all this testing?
Well, it depends. Functional testing often starts early on, alongside development. Developers will conduct unit tests as they build individual components. Right. Then, as the app grows, you have dedicated QA teams, quality assurance teams.
Okay.
They'll handle the larger scale integration and system tests.
Makes sense.
And then you have acceptance testing. Remember, we talked about that. That usually happens right before release, and that often involves the client.
Right. The client gets to sign off on it.
Exactly. Now, non-functional testing usually happens a bit later in the process.
Okay.
Often after functional testing's been completed.
Gotcha.
And you often have specialists for this. Performance engineers, security experts, they use specific tools and techniques to really push the app to its limits.
So it's a whole team effort.
It really is. A lot of people working behind the scenes to make sure that the apps we use daily are reliable and enjoyable.
Yeah, because, we use apps for everything these days. I don't even think about all the work that goes into it half the time.
It's a hidden world, but it's a crucial one. And remember, testing isn't just about finding and fixing bugs.
There's more to it.
It's ultimately about creating a high-quality user experience. It's about ensuring that the app not only functions correctly, but is also enjoyable and satisfying to use.
That's a good point. It's like you said earlier, it's got to be a complete experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about today.
My pleasure.
I know I'll be looking at my apps a little differently now, knowing all the testing that goes on behind the scenes.
I hope so. It's a fascinating field. And maybe something for our listeners to think about is, what kind of non-functional test would you design? What aspect of an app is most important to you?
Yeah. What makes an app truly great for you? Something to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to another Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.